Next, we're digging into the history of a few of Central Ohio's cemeteries, and later, a visit to a final resting place for beloved pets.
Support for Columbus Neighborhoods is provided by American Electric Power is proud to sponsor WOSU Public Media Columbus Neighborhoods. Working together with our communities, we're committed to powering a bright, boundless future for us all.
At Ohio Health, we believe it's important to have a healthy understanding of the world around you. That's why we're proud sponsors of WOSU Public Media and their work to educate, entertain, and inspire the people we serve.
Bailey Cavalieri, your relationship with your law firm doesn't need to be complicated, it just needs to be right. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Cemeteries are fascinating places that tell us just a little about the people who are buried here. For example, Vonnie Troutman, the wife of J.D. Troutman, died in 1889 at age 31. And clearly she was loved. There's a beautiful poem here. And in Union Cemetery, one of the oldest in Franklin County, the stories go even deeper than what's on the headstones. Historian Mary Rogers takes us on a tour of the cemetery archives and uncovers the history they hold.
Union Cemetery's oldest burial is 1806. It is Balzer Hess. He is one of the original pioneers of this area. And that was the beginning of what became a graveyard in this area. So not only did the Hess family use it for burials, but other family and friends from a more extended area began to use that cemetery space. But it wasn't until the 1840s that Union Cemetery was actually founded. Back in the 1840s, there would have been a group of these graveyards. Most of the time, a graveyard is attached to a church. Cemeteries that were not attached to church would have come together as a union of cemeteries to share expenditures. Now, the association back in 1848 most likely would have been a part of that union. And it's my understanding that when that union broke up, that Union Cemetery kept that name, and that's the name that is chosen when the official association begins in the 1870s. It's not until 1879 that we actually have documentation. This is the very first minute from the official minute book of the association. It starts by saying that there is a desire to establish the association and that they are going to have an official meeting at the Baptist Church here in Clinton Township. I've pulled a map from 1872 to try to get an understanding of where that church might have been, and there is a church that is right across the street from the established graveyard. In 1878, they agreed to actually elect officers and begin the association. What they're doing is making a business out of this cemetery operation. And as a result, most of the records that we have here are going to be accounting and land management records. We're keeping track of what kind of revenue we take in, where we actually inter people so that we know exactly how much space we haven't used and what we might be able to sell. So a lot of the early records are actually what would be certificates of ownerships. Not a lot of burial records because families back then would have taken care of their own burials. They would have also taken care of their own markers, and there wouldn't have been a lot of rules and regulations associated with that. As the years progress, you start to see where the Cemetery Association, in order to be able to maintain the cemetery, needs to start putting together some rules. One rule would be that they eliminate the ability for a family to fence in their particular part of the cemetery. Another one would be whether or not you're able to do an internment on Sunday. Dogs in the cemetery become an issue. Horses in the cemetery become an issue. And these are all things that would be associated with the just growth of both the cemetery and the number of people who are visiting the cemetery. An early issue that comes up is the fact that it is cold in Ohio. And it is not possible for people to be buried during the winter months. They decide they need what is called a dead house, a storage location where they can keep people until the weather warms enough to actually be able to do an interment. This book shows us where the cemetery decides that it's time to remove this particular element of the cemetery. So we have these great photographs that would have been taken in the summer of '29, where they are memorializing the dead house because they're getting ready to demolish it. In the 1920s, the cemetery would have had about 48 acres of land, and most of this land would have been close to Doddridge Street, off of Olentangy River Road. As they expand, they're purchasing farmland from the farmers that are in this area. So Mr. Ackerman, Mr. Hess, these would have been second or even third generation pioneer families that are still owning land in this area. We start to purchase land moving northward, closer to what we see as Riverside Hospital today. Ultimately, we purchase about 75 acres of land on the east side of Olentangy River Road. Then we jump over to the west side of Olentangy River Road in the late 1930s, early 1940s. And at that point, we purchase almost the same amount of land. We're purchasing land that may already have buildings or structures on it, in some cases houses, in some cases barns. So we may take a house and use it for the superintendent for a period of time. We have used barns for tool sheds and things like that, but ultimately we need to clear the land of these pieces of property. As the cemetery records mature, we can also see where current events are being documented as part of the cemetery's business records. Here in 1910, they're relocating a cemetery from the Clintonville area over to Union Cemetery. This is because that property is going to be used for houses and schools and the development of the Beachwald area. Here in 1918, we see the impacts of the influenza situation that was here in Columbus. Pneumonia, influenza, pneumonia. A lot of times we'll have people who come and visit and they want to see if we have death certificates for their loved ones. Those are documents that are maintained by the Department of Health. What we would have is what's called a transit permit. This is a document that a funeral director would obtain that allows him to actually bring us an individual for burial. When I first started to work here, I wasn't sure how often we would interact with these older records. But the reality is that I find reason to be interacting with these records on a daily basis. Right now at Union Cemetery, we have over 80,000 people here. So knowing exactly where everybody is, being able to get visitors to the right place, this is part of our day-to-day effort. And we use these records to make sure that we can answer those questions to the best of our ability.
Next, the forces that change a cemetery and what we can learn from them today. And later, a visit to a cemetery solely for beloved pets. Along with the larger, more notable cemeteries, there are also smaller ones sprinkled throughout central Ohio. This next story tells us about how the oldest cemeteries in Columbus have changed and what we can learn about them now.
1797, Lucas Sullivan came, platted the town, started inviting people to come up and live here. People are starting to live here. Well, people are going to start dying. You need a place for them to be. Franklinton Cemetery started in 1799, and you're going to find a lot of Revolutionary War people here because this was a part of the Virginia Military District. It was the only way that Virginia could pay some of their veterans. War of 1812 veterans in this cemetery as well, and a lot of the founders of Franklinton and Columbus.
you'll recognize the names. We have the Goodales, you also have the Sandusky's,
McDowell's,
McDowell's.
Deerduff.
There's even a street named after the McDowells. If you look around, the cemetery is not that big. So as the population increased, we had to find other places to go. And so one of the things they did was they started to move out from Franklinton and into Greenlawn.
There's a movement in the mid-1800s to start to create cemeteries outside of cities. One of the reasons was for health reasons. We had a lot of cholera epidemics, typhoid, and you're burying people in the ground, and that could possibly get into the groundwater. Also for development. Sullivan had a grist mill and a sawmill nearby. The river was right past us, and in the 1850s, a railroad was put into this space. And in the 1890s, another railroad was added to that, which pretty much was the death knell of Franklinton Cemetery. When Greenlawn was created in 1872, the prominent families were starting to buy their own family plots and bringing their family to those resting places. There was one African American buried here. His name was Arthur Boak. He actually was adopted by the Sullivan family. He was born about the same time as Lucas Sullivan's son, Joseph. He was supposedly the son of an ex-slave, and Sarah Sullivan decided to bring him into the family, adopted him, and raised him as one of their sons. He was buried here with the family, and then as the family was moved to Greenlawn, he was moved with them as well. So that shows you just how much the family particularly cared for him and made him a part of their family. Columbus is actually founded in 1812, and in 1813 there's a public cemetery, and it was just called the Public Cemetery at that time, just north of where Naughton is today. It was outside of the city limits. It later becomes known as the North Cemetery. In the 1840s there's a little bit of development, and so there's concern about the size of the cemetery and its growth, but it still continues to grow. There were 3 or 4 additions to the cemetery. As the rail systems start to come in the mid-1800s, it's pushing up against that area. What comes with rail? Industry, business, people. And there's a decision, again, as part of the movement to move cemeteries outside of populated areas to take down the North Cemetery and try to remove those bodies. They're going to be moved to Greenlawn. One of the news articles I read said that they had removed over 800 bodies in that initial process. But we're still finding today that there are a lot of people who are still residents of that cemetery, so to speak.
Today, it's known as the North Market. I have no doubt if they start to dig and they start to build apartment complexes, they're going to find bodies. So I would just say when you go to the North Market, just remember to walk lightly, because you never know what you're walking across.
There were Chinese in Columbus kind of early on. You'll find that some of the first burials were actually at Greenlawn Cemetery. And then at one point, a particular burial in 1956 for a gentleman named Chan Wu. He was the patriarch of the Chinese community at that time. He had passed away, and because of the Chinese New Year holiday coming up, the burial had to be set for a Sunday. Greenlawn's regulations said they couldn't bury people on Sunday, so they had to look for an alternative. They came here to East Lawn because they would allow burials, and as a result of that, the Chinese community actually gathered together and said, we're making a decision to propose to buy a huge lot out here for future Chinese burials. So we're here at East Lawn with Thor Triplett, the owner of the cemetery, and he'll give us a little more history.
East Lawn Cemetery was founded in 1923, and it originally comprised of 80 acres. During the Depression, East Lawn lost about half of its land in foreclosure. The mortgage was owned by Capital University, or the Lutheran Seminary College. The area that we're in right now is the original Chinese section. It was dedicated by the Columbus Chinese Benevolent Organization in 1956.
This is the Lee family. They had the Ho Toi restaurant, which was down on State Street. Used to be on Town Street at one time. Back behind us is the Yi family. They had the Ding Ho restaurant, which was one of the oldest Chinese restaurants in Columbus.
There was a fella that approached me back in 1998, and his name was Andy Chan. And he was a friend of Michael Tsao, who owned the Kahiki restaurant. And at that time, the Kahiki was doing food preparation, frozen foods. Andy Chan and another fella decided that they wanted to provide a benefit to their employees who were making egg rolls, frozen prepared egg rolls, because there was diminishing room here in this section here and no room for expansion, that they wanted to open up a new section in the cemetery north of where we're standing now. So they bought about 75 grave spaces with an option to purchase additional. A lot of the headstones that you may see in the Chinese sections, you'll notice that they're black or red. The red color represents an evil-free condition, and for the Chinese today it represents happiness, good fortune, and protection.
One of the things that reflects our culture and our society is how we take care of our dead. And it's reflected in everything from the simplicity of Franklinton Cemetery to the beautiful tombstones that you see over in the Asian cemetery. So it's a great opportunity, even if you don't have ancestors here, to again look at a community that you are living amongst.
Next, a visit to a cemetery solely for beloved pets. And then, Curious Sea Bus investigates the history of the Insane Asylum Cemetery. Historically, cemeteries were designed for the living to enjoy. In fact, most people use cemeteries as a place to have a picnic and enjoy the sunshine. And some cemeteries weren't strictly just for people either. There are pockets of pet cemeteries all over Columbus. Local artist Mary Jo Bohl moved to Columbus in 1989 to teach art at OSU and soon took an interest in preserving one of those pet cemeteries. Here's her story.
The Brown Pet Cemetery was started in the 1920s, the same decade as the Columbus Airport, which now surrounds the whole cemetery. It was begun by Walter Brown, who was a veterinarian here in town. I've been coming here since the 90s when I moved to Columbus to teach at Ohio State in the art department. And I grew up going to funerals a lot as a young person, and seeing singular, amazing tombstones somehow always made me feel better about death. So this is the Brown Pet Cemetery, and it goes back really far, all the way to this ravine, and it goes back to the 1920s. And you almost can follow pop culture through the names. Like back here you might see Bugsby, or it sounds like a gangster or something. And I think because it's pets, there's all kinds of treatments. It's almost like they're more emotional than you might find in a human cemetery. Oh, this might be good. Let's see. Perhaps to others he was only a collie dog, but then they didn't understand, for to us he was a pal, a friend. Oh, I love this one. Here's Googles from here they were Googling in 1922. It's really sad seeing all of the vandalism. Vandals, stop. I don't know what that impetus is to wreck all of these. This one, this is a do-it-yourselfer. It says Inky in marbles, and just the scale of this place, I think, is mind-blowing. And it's sort of like a knoll. And sometimes you can be walking and a plane will just go right by. And then over here you can see a whole pedigree pup section. They must all be related. So, and I'm pretty sure I've heard that there's a donkey buried here. And now we're really getting up into the 1940s, 1950s, and Jingle and Rusty and Cotton. Oh, here's one I adore. I like how Satan is softened by being our best boy. This is a real favorite. I just love these with Sister Fluffy and Brother Tuffy, and then Buddy the bird below. It's a real sweet one. And some of the tomb plaques, it's almost like the dogs are almost turning into weird humans or something as the pictures solarize. And I'll show you this one is amazing. Prince! I love the way, this is the one I repaired, and I it was loose and I just re-glued it, but I just love the way it looks like he's going off to somewhere else. Blondie, I mean, you can really get a sense, Gigi, you really get a sense of the names following what people are watching or seeing in films and TV. But this one has the owner. There aren't many that have the owners on the tomb plaques. And if you come in the winter, if you look even into the brush here, there's more parts of the cemetery. As my mother, the nurse, always said, you've got to have a good gallows sense of humor if you're going to deal with death. And there's some great examples here. We've got Damn It and Stinky Bill, and this one, Gay Bit of Copper, Penny. Such a good one. And the more do-it-yourselfers, you know, somebody probably worked in a machine shop and then at the end of the day put something together. So certainly there's the other part of the turgid's very immediate sadness. There's also the humor. Yeah, it seems that as we come up in time with Jingles and G.I. Joe and these other ones that sort of follow pop culture up into the 60s and 70s, they're becoming the flush kind that are probably easier to mow over, to tell you the truth. And of course it didn't cost as much. But we're also going to see in the 1970s, there must have been one monument company that was making quite a few of these. Like here's Sporty Reed. Look at that. That is, poor Sporty Reed really got kind of a little weird little folk art guy here. Look at, this is so weird. I mean, look at that cat, always in our hearts, Jenny. But Jenny, they're really interesting depictions. In '97, it was a land gift to the Columbus Foundation. And part of me wishes the Columbus Foundation would come and fence it in and, you know, tidy it all up. But the truth is, then it can't be what it is now, which is this kind of hidey-ho, calm spot. And it's a place that needs to be respected.
Curious Cbus is WOSU's project where you submit your questions about our region, its people, or its history, and we assign a reporter or producer to investigate it. Today's question comes from one curious viewer who wants to know more about one of Columbus's most unusual cemeteries. She asks, what is the history of the Insane Cemetery? And are there really body parts buried there? In Columbus's Hilltop neighborhood, there are actually two small cemeteries with plaques that read Old Insane and Penal Cemetery. Their story goes back to Ohio's first treatment center for mental illness and in fact the first state-supported hospital ever, the Ohio Lunatic Asylum. It was approved by the state in 1835 and built on East Broad Street about a mile from the State House. Tragically, the building was destroyed in 1868 by a fire that killed 6 patients. Instead of rebuilding there, the new hospital would be set on 300 acres along West Broad Street. When the hospital opened in 1877, it was known as the Columbus Hospital for the Insane. It is said to have been the largest building in the United States until that title was taken by the Pentagon. The building was designed in a style advocated by renowned psychiatrist Thomas Story Kirkbride. Its sprawling floor plan sought to promote a healing environment filled with fresh air and natural light. Originally, the building was designed to treat about 850 patients, but reportedly housed almost 3,000 by 1935. Over the years, doctors treated patients with what were considered the best therapies of the time, including lithium, lobotomies, and electroshock therapy. By the 1970s, the building was falling into disrepair and becoming increasingly expensive to maintain. Despite efforts by preservationists to save the Victorian architecture, the massive hospital was completely demolished in the early 90s. Patients who died at the hospital and whose families didn't have the resources for burial are likely those buried on the property in Hilltop. The state also buried inmates from the Ohio Penitentiary. Many of the headstones are in bad shape, marked with serial numbers or read unknown. But at least one victim of the 1868 asylum fire is known to be buried there. One headstone that has sparked interest among visitors is marked Specimens. There's a lot of speculation online about what might be buried there, but the truth is we don't know. Parts of cadavers used for medical research is a likely answer, but for the time being, it'll have to remain a mystery. Do you have a question for Curious C-Bus? Head over to wosu.org/curious to submit your idea, vote on which question we should investigate next, and see what we've covered so far.
Thanks for being with us, and remember you can catch all our episodes on columbusneighborhoods.org. Plus see our stories on the WOSU mobile app, and you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll see you back here next week on Columbus Neighborhoods.
Winter has come and gone, my dear. All that is left is sun, my dear. When will you come around and hear my call to you? I call to you, my
Support for Columbus Neighborhoods is provided by American Electric Power is proud to sponsor WOSU Public Media Columbus Neighborhoods. Working together with our communities, we're committed to powering a bright, boundless future for us all.
At Ohio Health, we believe it's important to have a healthy understanding of the world around you. That's why we're proud sponsors of WOSU Public Media and their work to educate, entertain, and inspire the people we serve.
Bailey Cavalieri, your relationship with your law firm doesn't need to be complicated, it just needs to be right. And by viewers like you. Thank you.